So just for people who are trickling in, we're gonna get started just in a minute. If you want to take a quick minute just to introduce yourselves to the people sitting around you. If you're in the live stream, maybe you can say salams, let people know where you're logging in from. Okay, should we get started? Bismillah, Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillah, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa barak wasallam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. So we're changing up a little bit of the structure to the halaqa Monday nights. I was traveling the last few weeks uh, out of the country. And prior to, we had gone for a few months talking about the first 11 verses of Surah Al-Mu'minun. We finished that a few weeks ago, alhamdulillah, and are transitioning into some different things now. I wasn't supposed to be in the country today, so it just happened that I ended up coming back earlier with my family. I think they were just a little homesick. They were in Egypt for about 6 weeks, mashallah, and they had a really good time. And we were able to come back all together. So we figured either we wouldn't do something tonight, we decided to. So we're going to be talking today um, on what could be a one off topic, but if you all seem to think it goes well, we could build a class around it uh, that frames itself off of the initial construct of the prophetic way. And today we're talking about the prophetic way to deal with difficult people. Um, and so, thinking about that in terms of a variety of topics, the prophetic way to be kind to oneself, the prophetic way to treat your coworkers, the prophetic way to engage neighbors in a non Muslim society, the prophetic way to observe Ramadan. I mean, you could apply it to anything because the frame in and of itself is one that understands that the Prophet ﷺ for us is both a lived example and not just historically an individual who lived, but his example represents the most balanced way of living. And so when we identify a middle path, we understand that the Prophet ﷺ's character, the mode in which he engaged people, he engaged himself, he engaged Allah, represents the way that Allah would want us to also aspire towards living. Right? May Allah make us from amongst those who adopt the Sunnah both outwardly and inwardly. Or we could shift to other topics. We were going through the 40 hadith of Imam Nawawi for a couple of years and got through half of the text. We were talking about the Sirah and went through the entire Meccan period on Wednesdays. And I think at the end of August, Imam Ibad Rahman's class will stop. I don't know if I'll do something on Wednesday nights or not, in addition to Mondays, but we can discuss that also. And now with construction starting, alhamdulillah, And a big part of what was occupying a lot of time, kind of being shifted into an implementation phase, we want to start to think out both on site as well as off site what kind of things we can do to enhance some of the foundational values that we're still looking to build this institution upon, primarily from amongst them suhba, fellowship, community, ilm, knowledge, and khidmah, service. Um, and so trying to build out some of those things more community oriented. So, for example, we're planning on bringing back some variation of our Jummah lunches that we used to do, is a good way to build community and have suhbah, and thinking about things in that way too. Well, I can feel the air a lot more now. Can everybody feel the air a lot more? Yeah. How about over here? Can you guys feel the air? Yeah. Great. Alhamdulillah. Um, we shifted all the AC units to fan on just to see if that would make a difference because it was pretty stale in here. But we can kind of gauge at the end how everybody's feeling. So we wanted to engage in this topic at a practical level. I could tell you, generally speaking, I probably now talk to people on average on a daily basis, one on one, small groups, for about anywhere from 4 to 6 hours of my day, including weekends. People who are just holding a lot, they're carrying a lot, they have a lot of needs, alhamdulillah. Um, and a generalization I am comfortable making is that many people just have difficult dynamics in relationships that they're trying to maneuver with friends, family, coworkers, uh, trying to understand how they themselves might be the difficult individual in a dynamic. Allah knows best. And so we wanted to think about this in some more foundational ways, looking at the Sirah, looking at Quran, looking at how we don't think about it just idealistically, but at the level of reality. And what I wanted to do was start this session with dua. We'll end with dua as well, just to help us get a little bit more centered to the space, and allow for people to kind of trickle in with the weather as well. So people want to just take a minute. I know we spent our day doing everything that we were doing in the day, but if you want to just bring yourself to this space, we'll turn to Allah to start with dua, inshallah, to enhance the barakah of the gathering, and then we'll go from there. اللهم آمين. اللهم لك الحمد كما ينبغي لوجهك وعظيم سلطانك. لك الحمد حمدا طاهرا طيبا مباركا فيه إلى يوم الدين. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد في الأولين وفي الآخرين. اللهم اجعلنا من المخلصين. اللهم اجعلنا من المخلصين. اللهم اجعلنا من المخلصين. We begin this supplication in your name, Ya Allah, and beseech you to send your choicest salutations upon your most beloved, sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam. We come to you on this evening, Ya Rabbi, with open hearts, asking you to teach us something that we are all in need of, not only for the people around us, but for ourselves. Ya Allah, you know the relationships in our lives that are easy, and you know the ones that are difficult. You know the people who bring us comfort, and you know the people who test our patience. You know the conversations we look forward to, and you know the conversations we avoid. You know the names we carry in our hearts tonight. You know the people who have hurt us. You know the people we struggle to understand. And you know the people we may have hurt ourselves. Ya Allah, before we ask you to change anyone else, help us to become willing to look at ourselves. Give us the humility to ask, what is my part in all of it? When we have been wronged, help us to respond without becoming unjust. When we have been disrespected, help us to maintain our dignity without becoming disrespectful ourselves. When we are angry, help us to pause before we speak. When we are hurt, help us to not turn that hurt into harm. When we don't know someone's intention, protect us from assuming the worst. When our ego tells us that we have to win, remind us that you are more pleased with reconciliation than with our being right. Ya Allah, teach us the prophetic way of dealing with people. Teach us the gentleness of your messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Teach us his patience. Teach us his courage. Teach us his wisdom. Teach us his ability to forgive. Teach us his ability to establish boundaries without hatred. Teach us how he could be merciful without being weak and firm without being harsh. give us wisdom tonight. Help us to understand the difference between patience and passivity, between forgiveness and permission, between mercy and allowing ourselves to be harmed, between maintaining relationships and allowing unhealthy patterns to continue. Help us to know when to speak, when to listen, when to apologize, when to set a boundary, when to seek help, and when to simply step away and leave the matter with you. Ya Allah, make this gathering a place where hearts become softer. Give us the courage to reflect honestly. Give us the humility to recognize ourselves in what we hear. Don't let us spend this time thinking only about the difficult people in our lives. Help us to ask what you are trying to teach us through this relationship. And Ya Allah, if there is someone we need to forgive, begin that process in our hearts. If there is someone we need to apologize to, give us courage. If there is a conversation we need to have, give us wisdom. If there is a boundary we need to establish, give us strength. If there is something we need to let go of, give us peace. And if there is something within ourselves that needs to change, give us the humility to change it. Ya Allah, let tonight bring us closer to you. Let us leave with more than information. Let us leave with greater wisdom, greater compassion, greater courage, and greater awareness of our own hearts. And make the character of your beloved sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam, our messenger, Muhammad, something we simply don't admire, but something we strive to live. Protect us always from hearts that are not humble, tongues that are not wise, and eyes that have forgotten how to cry. Forgive us for our shortcomings and guide and bless us all. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا يا مولانا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم وصلى الله تعالى على خير خلقه محمد وآله وصحبه أجمعين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. So the mode in which we want to understand how we're going to approach this, there's a few different things that we're going to want to discuss tonight. One, we want to discuss how we identify what it is that we're dealing with. Two, we want to be able to think about from a prophetic framework how it is that we don't react with immediacy, but we assess with foresight as best as possible. Where and how we can learn to set appropriate boundaries and know when to disengage, how we can understand forgiveness without becoming naive, and leaving what we can't control with Allah and letting our comfortability be in terms of what we have control over, and letting ourselves understand that we're starting this evening tonight with something that pretty much every one of us has in common. If you look around this room, all of you don't know the rest of you. A good number of you might know me by virtue of the way our community is structured. But in terms of what it is that we have as commonality, diverse racially, culturally, ethnically, socioeconomically, diverse in terms of life experience, diverse in terms of what it is that experiences even bring up within us. There's a lot of different ways that we can segment ourselves into isolated individuals. But a common thing that all of us have, likely, is that each one of us has difficult people in our lives. You have to be comfortable in being able to acknowledge that in order to then understand how it is that you can approach those relationships. And if I said this, that each one of us has difficult people in our lives, some of you automatically had a person pop into your head. Some of you already thought about someone who that might be. And if you haven't, if you gave yourself a little bit of time, likely that person would surface. A parent, a relative of some kind, a spouse, a significant other, a coworker, a peer, a student, a community leader, a person that you've had deep interaction with, nominal interaction with. It could be somebody who frequents this community or this Islamic center or other communities, other masjids that you're a part of. One of the more harder parts for us to navigate is that it's also not so easy to just say, I'm going to just leave that person behind. There's no fundamental way that most of us can say, I'm done with my family. I'm done with a parent who is toxic. I'm done with a sibling who is narcissistic. I'm done with a friend who shows that they don't have my back. I've been married for a week and I'm just going to leave it right now. Or if the mechanism is not one that's rooted in personal life as such, but professional life, you can work in an environment that is deeply problematic and there is an absence of respect. There is a elevated sense of challenge and hostility, but in your head, it's also, I can't leave this job. How am I going to walk away from the only source of income I have in a market that quite often is now looking for reasons to lay off rather than retain, right? May Allah protect each of you and grant you livelihood that always comes from a source that's pleasing and permissible and something that never creates financial anxiety and constraints with you. And for us, what we want to be able to understand is not about necessarily, hey, at a platitudinal level, here's some stories that kind of romanticize things and then inspire for a moment and talk about things like sabr and patience in ways that really don't have substance. More so, the goal for us is going to be, what do I actually do when someone is difficult in my life? And it's not going to be a cookie cutter answer. In some dynamics, it's going to be different based off of the persons that are involved. But at a practical level, I start to bring strategy into the dynamic of my relationship because in our tradition, we're not ever asked to be in a place that we assume being religious equates to just turning yourself into a doormat or taking a breath and saying that this is just what my life is going to always be, or being in a place where we have a delusional sense of what patience is. What happens if somebody is constantly criticizing you? What happens if somebody is always speaking to you disrespectfully? What happens if somebody refuses to listen? What happens if someone misunderstands you? What happens if somebody keeps crossing boundaries? What happens if someone has, in fact, hurt you? What if somebody refuses to apologize? What if somebody just gets angry so quickly? What happens if somebody is slandering, backbiting, gossiping about you? What happens if somebody manipulates you? What happens if somebody has learned how to push every single one of your buttons? It's not easy. And our deen doesn't tell us that we have to pretend like it's easy. The Prophet ﷺ's wife, Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, asks him, what is the most difficult day of your life? He doesn't say, Ya Aisha, we don't complain, but he says, Taif. Taif was the hardest day in his life. He has felt so much persecution, seen his people be persecuted. He's in a place where they have been boycotted and exiled in the latter part of Meccan revelation. There's a lot of challenges, a lot of hardship. He goes to place after place looking for sanctuary, severs his ties of lineage with his people so that protection now is non existent in their tribalistic set of ethos. And then in Taif, they abuse him, hurl stones at him, they run him out. We have narrations in our tradition that say what the Prophet was wearing on his blessed feet become hardened to the soles of his feet because of the excessive amount of blood that's coming out. It was a difficult time. And he said it was difficult. Does that make sense? People are going to have difficult people in their lives. You will inevitably have to make choices. And when we talk about it within the standpoint of the prophetic tradition, you have to recognize the mode in which the Prophet ﷺ existed. Whoa, front row seat. Look at you. What you're here to learn something. What a great. And then student number one, mashallah. Yeah. You think about the Prophet ﷺ, you don't think about him as anything other than a representative of the divine. And there's so many narrations that describe the prophetic character and Quranic verse that describes it. He is a rahmah. He is compassion in its human form manifest. There were people who were extremely rude to the Prophet, peace be upon him. There were people who were in a place where they purposely sought to distort his message so that people would misunderstand him, right? The Prophet tells people when he's standing on the rock, would you believe me if I told you there was an army behind this mountain ready to attack you? Many of you know this. They are all listening to him. They know him as a trustworthy person. Abu Lahab comes in the midst of it, irritated. Taba'an laka alihadha jama'atana. May you be perished. Is this why you gathered us? Taking them away from their business and their merchantry. And then everybody who was listening walks away because Abu Lahab, he then causes them to doubt and misunderstand. The Prophet is experiencing this. There are people who opposed him. There are people who hurt him. There are literal hadith where the chieftains of Mecca mock and abuse the Prophet in front of Fatima radiallahu ta'ala anha. There are people who disagreed with him in ways that weren't rooted in ethics, but just in hostility. And the prophetic response, with the foundation being rahmah, is one where we understand that sometimes he was gentle, sometimes he corrected, sometimes he walked away and disengaged, sometimes he forgave, sometimes he established a limit, sometimes he maintained a relationship, sometimes he did not maintain the relationship and he created distance. And how we want to assess is, how do I understand for me individually what response is appropriate for which situation? It cannot be that I have to sacrifice contentment and wellness or assume that patience means that regardless of what's coming at me, I don't have any option other than to put my back against the wall and say, this is a test in a way that creates suffocation and not an opportunity for understanding growth. Does that make sense? Everybody's got difficult people. Dealing with people is not easy. It's unfortunate that sometimes those could be the people that we want to have care for us the most. Or sometimes it could be people that we could care less, but they're in our lives indirectly because of circumstances. Our religion equips us with a lot of different things, and understanding the Sunnah, inclusive of, but not limited to, just your Sunnah prayers, and seeing how we can formulate an understanding of ethical conduct. The Prophet says that I came to perfect good conduct. That enables us to reconcile that sometimes it's going to be hard. Sometimes we're going to feel sad and terrible. Sometimes we're going to feel empowered. But there are different ways for us to engage different people. What I want you to do is take a few minutes individually. If you have come to halakas that I've done before, I would encourage you to bring notebooks to write in, not use just devices that quite often we turn to also mindlessly. But if that's what you use to your own ability to reflect, then reflect into a device. I want you to think just privately for yourself. You don't have to turn to people and discuss it, but just within you, who is one person in your life that you find to be difficult? And now, beyond just identifying by their name, I want you to finish this sentence for yourself. This person is difficult for me because, and then write out, what is the because that this person is difficult for you? who is a person that's difficult, and this person is difficult for me because. Now I want you to think for 2 minutes the behavior that is hardest for me is, and then finish also what that sentence is. So this person is difficult for me because, and the behavior that is hardest for me is, and then finish those thoughts. Let's do that just for 2 or 3 minutes. Okay. What I'd like you to do now is turn to the persons next to you, ideally in pairs, but try to make it not more than three. What makes someone difficult for you? And try to think about that in terms of behaviors and not labels necessarily. So, for example, they interrupt me, they criticize me, they don't respect my time, they don't listen, they always assume the worst, they don't apologize. We want to be able to start naming things to be able to understand for ourselves how it is that we respond, and everybody's not going to be the same. But quite often we kind of create this generic labeling that makes us believe that we're defining, but in reality, we're not. And the only thing that fundamentally we can really control in a situation, barring abuse or oppression, God forbid, may Allah protect us from experiencing it or doing it to anybody else. Barring abuse and oppression, in every other relationship dynamic, it takes two people to create a dynamic. And the only thing that can be controlled fully is going to be me. If we talk about quadrants that exist within behavioral kind of dynamics, there's not really so much one can do to fully choose someone else's choices. You can influence people's behaviors, but more so, you can control your own behaviors. So, if we can take a few minutes, if you don't know the names of the persons next to you, what makes someone difficult for you? Exchange names, and then let's talk about this question, and then we'll come back and discuss a bit. Go ahead. What makes someone difficult for you? And if you've never been in one of our halakas before, you don't want to only say the right thing or hesitate from speaking because you're worried about saying the wrong thing. And really listen to people as they're speaking and let them feel as if you're hearing them. But let's do this for a few minutes and then we'll come back and discuss. Okay. Maybe we can hear from people. What makes someone difficult for you? Right there, your hand went up so fast. I read your Substack today. I like the title of it. Right, like writer. Very clever. Mashallah.
Something I don't have specific people in mind, more so specific experiences. Something that makes people difficult is when they cannot take no for an answer the first time you tell them no.
Good. When someone doesn't take no for an answer. No means no. There's no way around that. Other thoughts? What are things? Yeah. You want to pass it up?
I was more thinking of dismissiveness when there is lack of acknowledgement that there is actually an issue going on, then there is no ground to even hold a conversation to move past that person.
Great. Dismissiveness. There's not room to even have a conversation. What else? What are behaviors that we find difficult? Just those two? Retribution? You want to pass the mic over here? Sorry. No one can hear you except me.
When someone goes out of their way to try to get their lick back on you, like they want, instead of being the better person, doing the right thing, quote unquote, they will actively instinct like to cause harm or hamper you in some type of way. When they both know, that, anybody doing that, they shouldn't do that, but they
Great.
still do.
Somebody can hurt you. They can actually harm you. Harmful behavior is something that all of us should find difficult, you know? And you should know also as you listen to this, if your inside becomes uncomfortable because you know you adopt this, it's going to be something that you have to be comfortable with, recognizing like, am I creating difficulty as well? We can keep going. Do you want to run the mic, Taha? Sorry. You get to. What else makes something difficult? What do we discuss?
And when they don't tie their own camel and they're just like, woe is me.
When someone has a victim mentality. Great. Other things? It's not an exhaustive list, but we want to name it. Yeah. You want to pass it back that way?
When people give way too much advice.
People give too much advice. Is that what you said? Yeah. Yeah, great. Anything else comes to mind? What do we discuss? You could say what someone else said too.
Guess since I'm holding the mic.
Yeah, go ahead.
The inability to engage in feedback or like have an honest and frank conversation.
Great. Other thoughts? Yeah. Dishonesty for appeasement. Yeah. Okay. I'm repeating also just so everyone hears, but also there's like 150 people on the live stream that are listening. So we want them to hear too. And I appreciate everyone who filled out the feedback form on the Surah Mu'minun class, trying to implement some of the things that people have asked for as best as possible. Work in progress. Why do we want to name these behaviors? Why do you want to get to a place where you're not living in your own head when you're dealing with difficult people, whether that is somebody that's easy to remove or somebody that's just going to be there and you have to figure out how to manage that dynamic because it's much easier to work with a behavior than a label. Do you understand? If Taha and I have a challenging dynamic, and Taha then goes to Hanan and says, Khalid is so toxic. Do you know? Right? You guys have had this conversation before? All the time. And when he goes and he says to her, he's so toxic, you can't really do anything with that label. Right? But if you say, Khalid is really dismissive of my opinions, Khalid criticizes me all the time. Khalid doesn't really listen. He just likes to hear his own voice. Khalid hurts people, right? You can strategize around a behavior more than you can strategize around an undefined label. Does that make sense? I can't do a lot with just she's toxic. That's more an expression that has meaning that's a little bit different. And that's where the bridge in something becoming practical versus something becoming suffocated shifts. You see what I mean? You can plan around a behavior and then understand the prophetic mode that we discussed is not just a one size fits all. The prophet was gentle, the prophet corrected, the prophet forgave, the prophet established limits, the prophet maintained relationships, the prophet created distance. But the ability to know how to respond in a difficult dynamic requires being able to work with behaviors and not with labels alone. And the label is going to give the guise of something happening, but is going to probably create rumination and not contemplation. Does that make sense? Does anybody have any thoughts or questions on that before we move on? So we're going to identify now 5 different types of dynamics that are going to be things likely that you can fit relationships under when we're talking about them from a difficulty standpoint. Yeah.
What I was saying was that what you just discussed earlier kind of does separate the behavior from the person. And if you kind of want to have like a conversation with them, you kind of have more of like you said, a strategy towards that instead of like, you know, seeing that person as a whole negatively, you can kind of separate the behavior from that person and maybe communicate it better too, rather than negatively seeing the person
Great.
entirely.
Jazakallah khair. The person on a whole embodies the behavior, but still is a person nonetheless. And the ability to have discussion with the individual, if that's what makes sense to do, requires them being able to identify behaviors. Behaviors can shift. Labels create the opportunity for stereotype that goes in with an assumption that doesn't then necessarily allow for a strategy. She's toxic and things will never change. Versus they don't respect me. And then I can come to a concluding point that says, I either have to deal with it or I don't stay in this relationship. Does that make sense? And the behavior enables us to then equip strategy, not even as an individual, but when there's people we lean on for support, or we are now gaining insight into things that are behavioral that we might not know we're actually bringing into a dynamic. The first step that we want to engage in is going to be in identifying what kind of difficult person are we dealing with. There's going to be 5 different types of things that we look at here. And I want you to understand all 5 of them as we go in and see where they have a lot of distinction. We're going to look at, sorry, I'm putting things in the WhatsApp group and on the YouTube. I'm trying to read also. It's probably not going to work. So at some point, figure out ways that we can kind of convene together, moderators, people helping, so we're not missing important things. But we're going to look at people who are difficult because there's just different in us and them. There's disagreement. There's misunderstanding. There's repeated unhealthy behavior. And there's genuine harm. And you have to acknowledge that all 5 things exist. Because genuine harm is not the same as disagreement. Do you understand? Repeated unhealthy behavior is also not the same as genuine harm, nor is it the same as just difference. These are all things that have specifics to them. Why do we want to do this? Because before you know how to respond, I need to know what it is that I'm actually dealing with. And that every difficult interaction is not going to warrant the same response. There's going to be a need to be able to understand these 5 things. So when we say someone is in a place where I have a difficult relationship and there's just difference, somebody might be more direct than me. Somebody might be less expressive than me. Somebody might have a different relationship and be quote unquote more emotional. Someone might be more private. Someone might be more spontaneous. Someone might be more structured. In this situation, a solution that we can land on can be something that is rooted in patience and flexibility. The difference in and of itself is that there are 2 fully autonomous individuals that are coming into interaction with each other, right? Many of you have known me for a long period of time. If you've known me deeply, I actually don't like talking so much. When I spend time with my friends and I spend time with people that I have deep relationships with, I'm pretty quiet. A lot of my job necessitates me talking in settings like this. When people engage me one on one, a good chunk of it is me listening to what they are holding and then responding in ways where I ask. If you've ever sat with me one on one, usually the first thing I ask people right off the bat after they've let out stuff is, what are you hoping to take from this conversation? Or where can I be helpful before I respond? Because I'm not talking to you to hear me. I want to know what you want to hear from me. And letting out a lot of stuff is also, for a lot of people, the first time they do that, and they can think about the things that they're thinking about. But because I talk a lot, I also express myself verbally differently in comparison to people who don't talk a lot. So my wife, for example, she is not like an extroverted person, perhaps the way someone might think that I'm an extroverted person. And the expressions that she has in terms of how she approaches things, there's difference to it than with me. It's not that one is better or worse. There just has to be a sense of patience that enables an understanding that difficulty can arise when there are now individuals who have not lived for 3 years or 5 years or 10 years, but 30 years, 40 years, 50 years you have been alive. Somebody else has also been alive that long too. And that friction can come where there's not an acknowledgement. When my wife and I first got married, we were praying prayers together quite regularly, as many of you might assume. And then there was one night, it was time for Isha, and she said, "You go pray, and I am going to pray by myself." And in my head, immediately, every single hadith and ayat around praying in congregation and the merits of it and this and that popped up. And I didn't say a word. And later on, I sat with her and I said to her, "Hey, how come you didn't want to pray Isha together?" My wife, not delving so much into her personal life, she converted to Islam probably 26, 27 years ago, well before she and I knew each other. She's probably practiced Islam longer than I have. If you are a convert in this room, or you know a convert, a general experience quite often is that converts quite often are left to just deal with everything on their own. And Muslims and Muslim communities don't do right by converts, as much as we don't do right by a lot of people. May Allah forgive us for this and enable this community to be one that builds well and listens to people and hears their needs. So my wife said to me that when we pray together, that's great, but I spent so much of my life praying alone. And so it's a very different experience for me to pray with somebody and pray behind someone than what I'd been accustomed to praying by myself all this time. There's no way I can understand that because my life cannot actually ever be that. I am not a Muslim woman who converted to Islam from an Hindu background, who the majority of my family is not Muslim, right? It's just different. Could it be difficult? And could it be a source of difficulty? Yeah, 100%. But this is one category difference. The second is going to be disagreement. We fundamentally just don't see something the same way. That's not going to always require respect being an automatic assumption as a variable of understanding, right? We don't always have to agree on certain things. And as a side, if you want to de-escalate conversations, they catch you off guard. Somebody says to you, hey, I want to talk to you for 2 minutes. Do you have 2 minutes? Welcome to my life. Jummah, we have 3 Jummahs back to back to back, right? And I'll say to people, hey, I got to start the next Jummah in 10 minutes, you know? And it is hot on Fridays. I don't know if you were here on Friday. I looked up on Friday when I got home because I'm fat and I'm trying to lose weight. That can you burn calories from public speaking? Do you know? And I gave the first Jummah and it was fine. And people came and said salams and this and that. And please don't ever be offended. I want to talk to everyone who possibly can. We're going to, as we hire people, solve for certain things. It's not sustainable. Like the community has grown manyfold, even just we haven't even been doing Jummah for a full year yet, you know, and the numbers have increased, right? You should never feel bad about asking for something, but we will bring on more people who are a lot better also at dealing with the diverse needs of our community. The number of times I've also had someone and I've said, hey, I got to talk, I got to give the next khutbah. I also don't have an office here, it's something private. And they're like, no, it's fine. It'll just take a minute. And then we'll walk and then they'll say something that like definitely is not for a minute, do you know? And it also is for like much longer than a minute. Or even where there's like kind of a circumstance that catches you off guard. You're sitting in your office. Hey, do you have 5 minutes? I just want to talk to you about something. And you're like, yeah, I have 5 minutes. And 5 minutes suddenly changed into a 45-minute discussion on something or the other. One of the things that you want to ask off the bat as you're trying to deal with something to de-escalate, is this something that we have to agree on? Like, is that the conclusion point that we're trying to reach? Do you know? Does it really make a difference if you think we should have gotten blue chairs versus black chairs? Do we have to agree on this? Right? Disagreement doesn't automatically assume disrespect. This is an important thing to understand because during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, people disagreed with one another and even disagreed with him. The Treaty of Hudaybiyah, the Prophet ﷺ agreed to not move forward with Hajj. Umar radiallahu an was not happy. Alasna bil Muslimin, alaysu bil mushrikeen. Like, why are we making agreements with them? Disagreement came up quite often. This is a fundamental part of being human. You want to ponder the question, can I disagree without making the other person now my enemy? If it doesn't go my way, and a choice has to be made, and there's disagreement, and it didn't work out the way I wanted it to, do I suddenly turn away from everything? And is that really like the hill I want to stand on and die on? Why does everybody have to agree on everything? Our religion did not define orthodoxy at a legal or theological level ever with having congruence on every opinion. Protestantism splinters into thousands of churches because they nuance theology into now what becomes separate churches on a whole. The Muslim experience, people actually were able to maintain respect within disagreement and not utilize disagreement as a mechanism to weaponize under the guise of really trying to create harm. So if you have disagreement, does it automatically jump into a prism around respect and respectfulness? A third type of difficult situation is going to be rooted in misunderstanding. Sometimes somebody is not intentionally trying to hurt us. This is why we named all 5 categories first, because sometimes people are genuinely trying to hurt you. You might also be genuinely at times tending to hurt someone. Allah protect us from it. Sometimes someone isn't intentionally hurting us. Sometimes they misunderstood us or we misunderstood them. Sometimes things were not communicated clearly. And the solution here sometimes is just about clarification. Running with the misunderstanding as a baseline. If you know someone is what they are, it's different. But recognizing as a third framing of a difficult relationship, misunderstanding is a easy part to that. The fourth is repeated unhealthy behavior. And here's now where we transition into things that are different. Somebody might be repeatedly insulting you. Somebody might be repetitively violating your boundaries. Somebody might be manipulating you, lying to you, humiliating you, refusing accountability, and creating unnecessary conflict. Here is where there has to be clear communication, boundaries, and consequences. And the boundaries and consequences part is where a lot of people have challenges. They don't know how to create boundaries and consequences, or how, if someone is in this situation, they don't know how to respect their ability to create boundaries and consequences. You might have a great relationship with your father or your mother, and your father and your mother might treat your sibling like garbage. Does that make sense? You might be in a place where you grow up in a home where boys are treated so different from girls. You can be in a community where your relationship to the community is different. I had 3 guys come to me from another city. I'm not going to tell you where it was. And these were all young South Asian men in their 20s. They wanted to create an app, and they asked me for feedback on what I thought. And it was about getting events on a calendar to create community, to bring people who were new into their city into community spaces. And they said, we want everybody to have the same experience we had. And it's so hard because we see for converts and people from this background and that background. I was like, hey guys, you're all like the same, right? You're literally 3 different versions of each other. You are 3 20-year-old Desi boys who are growing up in a predominantly South Asian Muslim community that has masjids that cater mostly to Muslim men who are South Asian. Tell me why a white lady who's a convert would find community through you inviting them to the places you feel comfortable. They're like, they wouldn't. I was like, what's your app going to do? Probably hurt a lot of people because they're going to show up to places that actually don't really make sense. Understanding that your experience doesn't define every single person's experience. And yours can be valid while someone else is valid too. You can have parents that were great to you and they're jerks to your sibling. You can be great to your child and be terrible to your other child. You can treat your coworkers well and go home and be an idiot. You can't use one thing to then demonstrate the other. Why do we want to bring the Sunnah into our life? The Prophet ﷺ was consistent in every place. Does that make sense? Unhealthy behavior that happens repetitively. Does that mean that it's okay if somebody insults you once or manipulates you? No. But in being able to understand the repetitiveness of a dynamic is something that has to be understood. And then lastly, genuine harm. Situations that involve emotional, physical, financial, or other forms of harm. We are a community that supports survivors. We have a domestic violence shelter. We are building it out. Inshallah, we unfortunately will need to build many more. Allah give us the tawfiq for that. We are a community that acknowledges like the challenges of race and class and how that creates harm. All kinds of things that contribute to the creation of harm. Genuine harm that has happened to someone does not become a justification for harm to someone else. If my grandfather, God forbid, abused my father, and my father abused me, and you expressed sympathy for me in that regard, and then I said to you, and that's why I abuse my son, none of you would say that that's okay. Does it make sense to do that? No. So genuine harm is not rooted in a prophetic model that tells us that you just keep taking it. Individually and communally, we have to build what it is that needs to happen. And this is going to require distance, support, intervention, and protection. It's not okay for you to tell your family member, just forgive dad for what he did to you. Dad didn't do it to you. Just forgive your sister. You know how she is. She didn't do it to you. The ability to not create conundrum that I'm already not right with someone in my life. And then you're telling me religiously I'm not right by God because I somehow am at fault because of what this person did to me. And you just want to pretend like everything is all well and good. If you hurt someone, you hurt them. If you harm someone, you harmed them. But if somebody harmed you, they harmed you. And you're not going to find the solace to your harm by taking it continuously or taking it out on somebody else. Genuine harm is important. As we build this thing out, we are going to do various trainings, bystander trainings, so that you don't sit back and pretend like you don't notice the indicators that someone in your life, your workplace, your community is being hurt and abused. Genuine harm is the fifth type: distance, support, intervention, and protection. What I'd like for us to do, I put these 5 categories in the WhatsApp group as well as on the YouTube. I'll say it out loud again: difference, disagreement, misunderstanding, repeated unhealthy behavior, and genuine harm. If you can turn to the persons next to you, which category is the hardest for you to distinguish from others? How is it hard for you to identify? Difference, disagreement, misunderstanding, repeated unhealthy behavior, and genuine harm. Which category is the hardest for you to distinguish from the others and why? Let's talk about it with the people around us for a bit and then we'll discuss. Go ahead. Okay. Now, if you can talk about when have you mistaken disagreement for disrespect? Let's talk about that for a couple minutes. When have you mistaken disagreement for disrespect? Go ahead. Okay, you can keep talking about that, but the last question that we want to add in case you've kind of ran out of stuff to talk about, when have you mistaken genuine mistreatment for something you simply needed to tolerate? Yeah, go ahead. Okay. Anyone have any quick thoughts they want to share? Reflections, reactions to what you're discussing in your groups? Anything coming up that you feel like would be beneficial for everyone to hear? Yeah. Who has a mic? Do I have a mic? No, it won't work. Uh, somebody has the mic from the last time, right? Yeah.
So we were saying, like, in terms of family, the repeated harmful behavior, we do feel like we have to tolerate it, because, like, usually, like, setting boundaries or having, you can't really cut them off. So we were just talking about, like, how to deal with that when it comes to family.
It depends. And with this many people in a room and people listening online, it's not easy to make like a blanket statement. But I can tell you that in some situations, it makes sense to create distance between you and a person. You have to be able to understand that because if you are in a place that's hostile and we have misconstrued ideas of what it means to take harm towards ourselves in pursuit of what's pleasing to Allah, most of you in the room are in different stages of life. You want to have an understanding of this primarily for yourself, and then secondly, what you're going to pass on to other people. And so if you assume there's an absolute that says there is no situation where Allah allows for a Muslim to cut off their Muslim family member. You've already then put yourself into a cage, right? It doesn't mean that there's also just, in any situation, a different form of abuse, which is letting someone believe you will abandon them at the slightest of infractions. Do you know? I have 2 children. Make dua for them. Allah make them from the righteous. They're great blessings in my life. Many of you have met my son Kareem, my daughter Medina. If they did something wrong, what if I just stopped talking to them? What's that going to do to them? It's not okay. If you're in a relationship with somebody and immediately in a marriage, the reconciliation to conflict is, if you don't do this, I'm going to leave you and divorce you, barring abuse, what's the other person going to think? So in both ends of it, if somebody now creates a suffocation and an absolute where there's no absolute, you're telling me that you have never read a story of a prophet of God that doesn't have a family problem? Almost every single prophet of God has a family problem. If you remove the opportunity to identify correctly and diagnose the dynamic, you're going to then remove the ability to strategize within the parameters of what it is that we are allowed to do. In some situations, the best thing to do is going to be to cut somebody off. I cannot begin to tell you the number of women who have been told to stay in abusive marriages as if that's a thing that is pleasing to Allah. Or rhetoric, do it for your children, do it for the kids. You know how many women the Prophet married that were divorced? You got to think about where it comes from. And that's why we want to talk out loud so we can confront what it is that we set up as intermediary beliefs in the forms of rules and assumptions. It might not be easy. We can acknowledge it's not easy. And as a community, we have to create support mechanisms. 2 weeks ago, I was on the phone with a woman who doesn't know how to leave an abusive relationship because she doesn't have the financial capacity. She's calling me from the other side of the country. How come in that side of the country, their Muslim community has not established funding mechanisms to help women leave abusive relationships? We have to establish it forthright also. Do you get what I'm saying? Does that make sense? You have to break the absolutes where there's not absolutes. And it doesn't mean that doing something will be easy. Sometimes the hardest thing is going to be leaving behind something that is not good for you. But you still have to do that. There has to be a plan and a strategy. When we help survivors exit from abusive situations, we have exit plans for them. You don't just pretend like you know what you're doing when you don't. Does that make sense? What else did we discuss? Any other thoughts that come up for people? Yeah, go ahead.
Assalamualaikum.
I'm sorry.
The first thing that came to mind when it comes to, I'll say, communities, both on a religious context and a cultural context, is like the basis of and the value of both religious and cultural value of like respecting your elders. And unfortunately, there can be instances of maybe the elder person in the situation convoluting disagreement with disrespect, and then that leading to disrespect being perpetuated to maybe the younger person. And this can be applied to a lot of dynamics, but specifically elder to younger kind of dynamics. And it can be hard to approach someone who, no matter what, if you're disagreeing, you're disrespecting them. And even if you're doing your utmost best to be respectful in the means of disagreement, it's like hitting a brick wall. So I just think that's a difficult situation.
A lot of you can relate to this or know people who can relate to it. Religiously, disobedience to parents is a bad thing. Religiously, disagreement does not equate to disobedience. Does that make sense? A solution that we're going to discuss potentially before Maghrib, inshallah, we'll get through everything today. A big part of a lot of what's going to help manage difficult dynamics, not the abusive ones, but there were 5 groupings that we talk about. Silence is a big part of our tradition. Man kana yu'minu billahi wal yawm al-akhir falyakul khayran aw liyasmut. Foundational hadith when people study character. Whosoever believes in Allah on the last day, let them speak good, utter good, or be silent. Silence can diffuse other people, and it creates an opportunity. We can move into this next part, because I think it's a good segue. What do you do in that moment? In that moment now, when the adult is telling you you're disrespectful, in the moment now where someone's putting you down, in the moment now where it's not just disagreement or difference, there's difficulty, there's agitation, the prophetic characteristic that's important to understand, don't react with immediacy. Everything does not have to become habituated and instinctive. The hadith that I'm putting in the WhatsApp group that many of you have read before, I'll put it in the YouTube chat also. People on the YouTube can also just look in the WhatsApp group. That would be really helpful, just in the interest of time. And I'll figure out a better way to do this going forward. This is a hadith that a lot of us have read before. The strong one is not the one who can overcome people by his strength, but the strong one is the one who can control himself while in anger. The hadith is not saying that a strong person never gets angry. If anything, it qualitatively is describing someone who is strong and acknowledging that the strong person gets angry. You understand? Anger is going to happen, and being hurt happens, and feeling disrespected happens. The question that you want to think about is, what do I do next? What am I doing in that moment? Take a breath, a prophetic pause. The Prophet ﷺ did not talk so much. The Bedouin urinated in the masjid. The Prophet just watched. The woman yells at the Prophet at the grave of her husband. The Prophet just listens and doesn't say a word. A man comes and abrasively grabs the cloak of the Prophet of God with hostility. He responds at the end of it with a smile and gives to him what it is that he's looking for. Silence, silence, silence. These are generalizations, but I want you to think about the first 90 seconds when you get triggered in a difficult situation with a difficult person. They annoy you, they irritate you, they bother you. Something happens that you disagree with. The immediacy of it and the hastiness that the Quran speaks about, that the Prophet lived contrary to. He took a pause and reflected. Consequently, كَانَ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ يَذْكُرُ اللَّهَ عَلَى كُلِّ أَحْيَانِهِ, that the Messenger of God remembered Allah all the time. This is what we talked about at Jummah on Friday, right? فَذَكِّرْ, remind. فَإِنَّ الذِّكْرَ تَنْفَعُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ, that indeed the reminder is of a benefit to the believer. Why? Because you can get derailed and you can have Iman, but you suddenly start working on autopilot. You need something to bring you back to a place of centering and recognizing the bigger question is, what's going to be pleasing to Allah in this moment? When I am triggered in that first 90 seconds, do I want to respond immediately? Do I want to send a text? Do I want to raise my voice? Do I want to prove my point? Do I want to defend myself? Do I want to go and tell the world what happened to me? All of these things are not problematic if there is a sense of strategy and consciousness to it, and a recognition that consequently, I still have accountability for my decisions and choices. You don't want to explain someone's pain away to them or be dismissive of hurt that happens, but to be able to understand that the world we live in wants us to live in worship of our feelings, as opposed to understand that somebody's got to be feeling the feeling. So when we talk about what is prophetic and Islamic, sometimes the most prophetic and Islamic thing we can do in the immediate, don't send the message, don't make the phone call, don't say a thing that you know you'll regret. Walk away, follow prophetic consideration and counsel. Why does the Prophet tell you to make wudu? Why does he tell you to sit down if you're standing and to lie down if you're sitting so that you can shift the energy in your body? Why does he tell you to breathe? Why does he tell you to make dua? Why does he tell you to come back to the conversation later? The heat of the conversation riles things up, and then nobody's listening to anybody at that point. You can't change your parents telling you that they say the word disrespect. What you can change is how you respond to their language towards you. It's not an easy shift, but it's a shift nonetheless. And when habits start to formulate and it becomes instinctive, later on, the exhaustion sets in and it creates now a spiral downward. None of this is going to ever change. That is the least likely belief in Allah. With Allah, anything is possible. What the Prophet did was take a pause and breathe and think about what's about to be exerted into the world. Not that it makes sense to me, but how is it being received by the other and what is it doing in my heart? Not just running on raw emotion. You can be a strong person and be angry so long as the anger is justifiable and righteous and not self-righteous, nor is it unjustifiable. Step number 1 is a prophetic pause. Do not get angry in a hadith does not mean that you never experience anger. It's that you don't allow anger to become the person that's making your decisions. You make your decisions. And it can be upsetted. What do you do when you get riled up emotionally? When you're stressed out and upset and bothered by something, something triggers you, catalyzes you. Do you attack? Do you defend? Do you withdraw? Do you over-explain? Do you become sarcastic? Do you just start sending things rapid fire without any presence? Do you start to gossip? Do you shut down? Do you seek revenge? You want to think about now what happens to you in the difficult dynamic, because your action, aside from impacting someone else's heart, is going to impact yours. It's not easy. You have to understand you have a prophet, peace be upon him, who led people in prayer that accused his wife of adultery. He performed a janazah dua for Abdullah ibn Ubay, who was the chief of the munafiqeen. It's not to be dismissive of prophetic example, but to understand that's the example of our prophet. How does he get to that place? Even when he doesn't know what to do, he still is exerting consciousness. If you do these things with consciousness, it's categorically different if you just do them instinctively. How can a parent slap their child in the name of Allah? How? Can they do that? No. When you hurt someone, were you thinking of God at that time? This is where the nafs is real. A hurt ego is still an ego. In that moment, how am I responding? What do I do? Just take a breath. It's so beautiful that Allah is actually a word you can say while you breathe. If you've ever studied tajweed and they do a diagram, or your tajweed teacher teaches you where letters come from in your mouth, in your throat, right? Where does the alif come from? Where does the full mouth lam come from? Where does the aspirated ha come from? You're literally starting with an alif, a lam, and a ha that breathes into the world. All of it can be said in a breath. You take a breath in that difficult situation and be comfortable with the fact in saying that despite what their perspective is, they're not right. Me disagreeing does not equate to disrespect. And how I see myself is going to be important in comparison to how someone else sees me. And this is why change starts from within. It's not that you have to pretend like something terrible isn't happening to you. You only can own what's happening and reorchestrate how you respond. And step number one is going to be that you take a pause. I want you to turn to the person's next to you and not think about it in a setting where we're all here in this space, but think about it in a situation that tests your patience. Think about it when the opportunity arises to put somebody in their place. What does a prophetic pause look like for you? What is that pause look like for you? And think about it in relation to which reaction creates the most problems for you, not the person that's on the other end. Forgiveness is for the forgiver. We don't have to always self-sacrifice, adopt a savior complex. You do things for your heart. When you attack, defend, withdraw, over-explain, become crazy sarcastic. I don't, you can't, you know how sarcastic people can be, right? And how that just turns into a place where it's hurtful. Sending messages, gossiping, shutting down. This is not something we want people to have. We don't want people who are being abused to shut down. We don't. Seeking revenge, retribution is not a good state of the heart. It's a toxic state. You can have justice, which is different from retribution. They're two entirely different things. Which reaction creates more problems for you? And what would a prophetic pause look like for you? You don't have to agree with me, but you want to fight whatever is inside of you that tells you it's a nonsensical thing. Because the person who paused, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, was the best of creation. Nobody can say that the Prophet just exerted and acted on raw emotion, habituated with no presence. We want to start to bring some of that. What does a prophetic pause look like for you? Let's talk about that for a couple of minutes, just with the persons next to us. What reaction creates the most problems? And what would a prophetic pause look like for me? And then we'll come back and continue. Go ahead. And a prophetic pause is like, I hear myself getting loud. I'm going to stop talking, right? I'm getting agitated. I'm going to go make wudu before I continue. Do you get what I mean? Practical stuff, not flowery, metaphorical stuff. What are tangible things you can do in those situations? What does a prophetic pause look like? Go ahead. Okay. We have about 20 minutes left. I wanted to make dua at the end too. So I want to try to just run through a few things. So maybe, is there one or two people that want to say anything before we move on? You don't have to. But anything that's coming up in your discussions? What would a prophetic pause look like for you? Yeah. Who's got the mic? There we go.
Assalamu alaikum. I have two questions I wanted to ask based on like reflections on what you've been saying and like where I feel like I personally am getting caught or like stuck with like misunderstanding someone and that idea of misunderstanding and being like maybe it's just their like intention that like that wasn't their intention. This is a conversation I've had with a lot of people of intention versus impact. How far is it okay for like an intention to, or like I'm like struggling to like phrase the question, but intention versus impact is kind of just where I get stuck because despite what someone's intention is, I think there's a responsibility and accountability linked to the impact that a certain behavior might have someone, and like detangling that I think is somewhere where I struggle in certain relationships. And then my other place where I was getting stuck is like what is like withdrawal versus taking space and distance. Like when is it okay to take space and distance, and in what way before it becomes withdrawal or like is perceived as withdrawal by the other person, that you might be trying to take a prophetic pause of like creating space, creating distance because you want to diffuse the situation, but then when does that become withdrawal?
Well, the reaction of the other person isn't the determinant variable, right? So, if Taha and I have a fight and why are you smiling? No? Sorry. Everyone know Taha. He's a great guy, mashallah. Taha and I have a fight, right? And he needs to take space. He can tell me, hey, I'm going to take some space. The next thing we're going to talk about practically is around intention. It's a good segue into it. But I still have to deal with my stuff. Do you know? If I did something wrong to Taha, one of the things our teachers tell us is the punishment for doing a sin is the sin itself, because you have to live with the fact that you did something. You have to live with the fact you're going to stand in front of God for the thing that you did. And it's going to sit with you. I did that to somebody else. Do you get what I mean? Withdrawal from a terminology standpoint has more of a sense of an unhealthy outlet versus like taking space as a healthy outlet. Do you get what I mean? Withdrawal can be, I just remove myself from everything in a problematic way versus I need to take a step from this just to have some space to recalibrate. Do you see the nuance difference?
Well, I want to ask what you mean by like withdrawal in a problematic way. What is a problematic way?
Like, I have a problem with my family and I just go and lock myself in my room and I don't talk to anybody for months. And it's not to comment on anybody who has any type of wellness condition, but speaking from a generic standpoint, where I get to a place where my sense of withdrawal has me turn towards things that are just now deepening the challenge, as opposed to an outlet being a means to enhance reality. I'm escaping from reality. You get what I mean? You can read about cycles of shame and how people unhealthily process shame. Some of us have sat and talked about this individually. You can go and see like where people are avoidant, they withdraw, they blame. Shame is a really hard thing to deal with. And then a lot of you come from cultures that are shame and honor cultures. And then it skews like understandings of things that build into like these platitudes of parents are always right and disagreement means disrespect. No, like we have absolutes. Allah is one. Do you know what I mean? Right? The Prophet's the last messenger, alayhi salam. Do you know? Sky's blue, right? Parents are always right is not a thing. You see? You have to be open, though, to the fact that some of your outlets are not healthy for you. as well as you don't have any outlets at all. There's no self-care, right? Intention and impact both go hand in hand. إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. Indeed, actions are by their intentions. You read it, but you also understand it. Both have to be sound, you know? So somebody is telling you you did something wrong to them. You want to be in a place where conflict is reconciled, not through explanation, but understanding when's the best time to introduce like context, and also to be able to understand what are you fundamentally explaining away, like why you did something that was problematic that you knew was going to hurt me. And the complexity here is that sometimes that's like the important thing to do. I know it was going to hurt you, but you keep like doing things that are harming yourself. So a young woman sat with me. Her friend is in a place where she like does a lot of substance and then goes to parties and is not conscious then of predatorial men who could take advantage of her. And her friend then says, like, we need to help her, and gets her help. And then the other friend is upset. Why did you tell people what I do? Like you knew that was going to hurt me. The right thing to do in that situation is to do what needs to be done. So where ethics are situational, they're not cookie cutter, you know? And like impact can be measured. And it's hard when you're dealing with diverse things. And then you get a lot of information from like reels that are rooted in lessening your attention span, where everything has to be like packaged in an entertaining way. Sometimes like you need to also be hurt to get you away from what it is that's like screwing up your life. And you might not want somebody to do what needs to be done for you, but it needs to be done. Do you get what I mean? Does that make sense? Why is this important to understand? It's because like everyone is not on an individual journey that's lonely, but that's why you don't want to like judge somebody without knowing them, because you don't know why people are the way that they are, man. Everybody's got some kind of crap going on in their life, right? Everybody's holding some kind of heaviness. Do you see? It's not a religion that just tells us to throw things at people. You have to measure what the outcome is, and impact there is important. Let's go through a few things really quickly and see where we can land. I don't know what we're going to do next Monday, but the intention is not to continue with this unless people think that that's something we should do. One, now we want to get into like how to deal with difficult dynamics. These are generalizations. 5 categories we talked about, right? Harm is different from disagreement. Do you understand? I don't live in your head right now. Do you get what I'm saying? I don't know who you're thinking about, what dynamic you're thinking about. I don't know like how you're applying it to a specific. Understand it objectively, as difficult as that might be, okay? Because some might be applicable, some might not be. One, you don't want to assume intention. And so a big problem in difficult relationships is that we're not responding to what people do. We respond to what we think their behavior means. Does that make sense? We're not responding to what they do. We respond to what we think their behavior means. So for example, somebody doesn't respond to a text. Immediately, a lot of you think, depending on who the person is, they're ignoring me. Why? They're angry with me. You know? That might be true, right? Taha says, I need space. I withdraw in an unhealthy way into my phone. And then every 5 minutes, hey, are you feeling better? Hey, are you feeling better? Hey, are you feeling better? And then Taha stops giving me bananas because he's upset with me. Taha brings bananas to the IC all the time. People don't know. He works at Amazon and they have a banana stand. And somehow he always brings a crate of bananas. If you ever want a banana, see Taha. Taha told me he needs space. My anxiety, manipulated by my nafs and my insecurity and shaitan's whispers into me, within me not knowing how to deal with my nonsense and my mistakes, then keeps thinking that him saying he needs space is him just telling me that he hates me. Why? How does that work? Take a pause, breathe. Certain things are not going to be figured out by tomorrow, but they will be figured out. And the immediacy of it happening necessitates having a plan that says when you are part of a meaningful relationship, there's going to be times that you hurt people or you will be hurt. And you have to be able to create an opportunity. Somebody talks to you in a way that gives you a short answer. They're being disrespectful. If we look at this verse from the Quran in Surah Al-Hujurat, I'll put it in the WhatsApp group. It's the 12th verse of Surah Al-Hujurat, the 49th chapter of the Quran. Allah is addressing the believers. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu. That's us. May Allah make us from the people of Iman. Avoid suspicion. Avoid making too many assumptions. Avoid many suspicions. Some assumptions are sinful, and do not spy on one another or speak ill of people behind their backs. Would any of you like to eat the flesh of your dead brother? No, you would hate it. So be mindful of God. God is ever relenting, most merciful. Surah Al-Hujurat has a lot of guidelines for communities as they build in terms of how we relate to one another at a communal level. When you assume the intentions of someone, generally, the pause says, what do I actually know and what am I assuming? Assumption can screw up a lot of stuff, a ton of stuff. And you have to think about what part of you is making the assumptions. So when something happens, you got to look for facts. Someone is kadhab because they lie. Someone is a kadhib because they're only hearing one part of a story. You can debate it as much as you want. And some things don't have two sides. Abuse, there's not neutrality to it. Some things are just wrong. Gaza, it's not complicated. There's no two sides to it. Trickle it down to individual dynamics of oppression. There's no two sides. Wrong is wrong. In things that are not those things, you have to be able to understand where there's vantage points from two people. And you get facts, and then you talk in a way that's rooted in pause and reflection. What am I telling myself about what happened? And what else could be true? Husn al-dhan is a part of our tradition. Thinking the best, not for the sake of the other, but for ourselves. Again, 5 categories. Genuine harm is not the place. We become imbalanced by making excuses about nonsense that we shouldn't. And we don't make excuses about the stuff that we should. Do you get what I mean? So if you texted someone important and they read it, you see the red notification, you know, they read it, right? My daughter and I were driving the other day to get some food. It was my wife's birthday. And we went to go pick up some food and we were joking around on something. And she said to me, Baba, Auntie so-and-so left me on delivered. And she hasn't responded to me in months. And she was giggling and laughing about it. And I said, Ya Allah, make my daughter someone who always finds joy in being left on red, right? Because, like, man, I've seen people lose their minds when they don't get a response right away. Do you know? I'm going to say this to you. You don't have to disagree with me or agree with me for it to be true. It's not conspiracy. The people who put the devices in your pocket, they want you to lose your mind. They want you to become a slave to the device. Because then outside of using the device, you're still a slave to it. Right? Somebody texts you and leaves you on red and doesn't respond for 6 hours. What story does your mind create? They're ignoring me. They're angry. They don't respect me. They're punishing me. They don't care. What else could be true? They're busy. They're overwhelmed. They forgot. They don't know how to respond. They're dealing with something. They don't have the bandwidth. I don't really talk about my personal life like in ways other than the ways you all hear me talk about it. About a month ago, 2 of my family members passed away back to back, unexpectedly. I shared it with some people, not many people. I'm not astonished by the low number of people who then reach out to express some type of support. Because I've sat with as many of you who have said to me, when people know that I'm sick or my loved one is sick or is dying or has died, or that they did something to hurt me and they just don't ask about it. I'm not sure why people are like this. Do you know? But I can tell you this because we are going to hire people who are going to serve this community. And we will always, inshallah, be a community that cares for the people that serves it. I've literally had conversations with people who know in that moment, me as a human, my family members have passed away, and I'm running to coordinate janazas for them, let alone when I do it for people in the community. And they still are saying, I need you to do this for me right now. And if I don't do it, it's not the norm. It's by far not the norm. 99% of the time, it's not the case. But it happens inevitably in a community of 20 or 30,000 people where someone will say, that person's upset with you because they reached out to you yesterday and you didn't respond to them. Or you told them that you didn't have time to do something right now. Everybody's not out to get you all the time. Category number 5, the people who genuinely harm, they genuinely harm. May Allah protect us from it and from being it. But sometimes people, they might have their own stuff going on. They're overwhelmed. They just forgot. They don't know how to respond. They're dealing with something, but they don't have the bandwidth. Does that make sense? If your mind is conjuring up the scenario, that's coming from within you, right? Allah make it easy. That's where the change comes from within. You don't want to turn an assumption into a fact, because the danger is we can convince ourselves of anything. And if you turn an assumption into a fact, then you are going to respond based off of the fact that you invented. Right? Khalid didn't respond to me. That must mean he doesn't like me. He talks to you differently than he talks to me. If you reached out to him, he would respond to you. No, man, I would respond to you all in the same way. I can't tell all of you that we have the same exact relationship because some of us in this room have never talked to each other individually, right? It doesn't mean that I don't care about every single one of you. And the only reason I'm using myself as an example is because my care for you is not going to be contingent on what you perceive of me. But there's going to be other dynamics to different relationships that you have that if you are assuming intention in a difficult situation, it's not going to make it easier unless you have something concrete to go off of. Does that make sense? The next thing, you want to talk to people, ideally, and not talk to everybody else other than the person that the difficult dynamic exists with. Do you know? So a common way that difficult relationships become worse is that we're not actually talking to the person we have the problem with. We're talking to our spouse, we're talking to our friend, we're talking to our sibling, we're talking to our coworker, we're talking in a group chat. Group chats are crazy. Like, I don't know how people text so much. I don't. And maybe that's because I'm getting older, right? And I just don't, like, you have to get off of your phone. It's crazy the way things evolve, right? The way people kill each other today is different from the way people killed each other 1,000 years ago. Every single vice has evolved in terrible ways. The way you can access zina on your phone is different from what people had to do to access zina 1,000 years ago. The way people can lie, backbite, cheat, deceive. You know how insanely easy it is to gamble today, right? It's crazy. I was talking to my kids about this. My kids and I have very interesting conversations. And my son and my daughter were talking to me about, Baba, you know, years ago, people would have to go to a casino to gamble. And now they can go to their phone to gamble. And I was like, yeah, that's very insightful. And, you know, why are we discussing this? I don't know. I don't know if they thought I had a gambling problem or like what was going on. But all these things evolve. And then mindlessness and irreconciled emotion has this mute consciousness around responsibility and accountability. Nobody's telling you to be a doormat, but you can't justify things. Intention and impact go hand in hand. And that's not just to the other, it goes back to your heart as well. You have to sometimes talk to the person that you actually have the issue with. It doesn't have to happen at anybody else's pace. But in order to have closure, and sometimes that conversation needs to be mediated by an objective person. It doesn't mean you go and confront your abuser or pretend like everything is la-di-da. We're not talking about that. But in other dynamics, when hearts are divided, this is like a priority of shaitan. You can read the hadith. That's what he wants to see happen. And the minute it dominoes, it continues and it continues and continues. Okay, some of the things that I wanted to talk about that we didn't get to today were about what are like actual boundaries and how do we do that? Like not just having words in our dictionary, but actually implementing those words. I wanted to talk about when gentleness is actually a strength and not a weakness. How rahmah doesn't mean that there's unlimited access. And that patience is not supposed to equate to passivity. Forgiveness does not equate to permission. And boundaries are not a punishment. And what does an Islamic boundary look like? How can we define that? I don't know if people want to continue this topic next Monday, just by a show of hands. Or people can actually show up in person to discuss it. Okay, great. So you don't have to. I don't know people who didn't have their hands down. That's fine too. You don't have to do it. I'm going to send out to people who took the Mu'minun class. I sent it out already, a feedback form. If people have like very kind of emotional attachment to certain things we should do weekly going forward, the 40 hadith of Imam Nawawi, the Sirah class, we can continue that. If people have other things that they feel like we could discuss, one of the things that I was thinking we could do is introduce topics in this frame, the prophetic way, and then delve into a topic. Maybe we'll do it over a couple of sessions or like one session, one off, so that we're kind of getting some tangible and practical things. But we'll continue with this next time and we'll finish it. It's a couple of other things just before we make dua, and then we'll call the adhan. Did anybody bring dates today? Can you grab them? Yeah. If anybody's fasting, we're bringing dates. We're going to call the adhan in just a minute. Tomorrow, we don't have any programs. Wednesday, Imam Ibadur Rahman is doing Tafsir Surah Yusuf. Thursday, we have the Ratib of Imam al-Haddad. And Friday, we'll have Jummah, as well as our sisters' halaqa. Next Friday, not this Friday, will be the last session of the sisters' halaqa on Fridays. And so try to come to those. It's at 3:30. We're going to be introducing a lot of other kind of programs gradually, but progressively. Our construction has started, alhamdulillah. Make dua that Allah facilitates it for us. And actually make this dua. We want the construction to be done before next Ramadan, because we'll need both floors for Ramadan, right? If it's not done, we're going to have just this space and we'll make it work. We just got to be flexible because we're building for the long term. But your duas are appreciated as we're building these things out. But just keep a note on what we're putting out on the listservs for different opportunities to be involved. We're going to revamp certain things as well, just as we're now hiring people and with construction in place, how that'll impact like different things. But it's not going to be anything drastic. Okay, let's close with dua, inshallah. Allahumma ameen. اللهم لك الحمد كما ينبغي لوجهك وعظيم سلطانك لك الحمد حمدا طاهرا طيبا مباركا فيه إلى يوم الدين اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد في الأولين وفي الآخرين اللهم اجعلنا من المخلصين اللهم اجعلنا من المخلصين اللهم اجعلنا من المخلصين. We begin this supplication in your name, Ya Allah. Beseech you to send your choicest salutations upon your most beloved, sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam. We began this evening, Ya Rabbi, thinking about difficult people. And now as we close, we bring those people back to you. You know their names, you know their stories, you know what happened, you know what was said, you know what we remember, and you know what we have forgotten. You know the wounds we carry that nobody else sees. Ya Allah, we ask you first for wisdom. When someone is difficult with us, help us to know what to do. If we need to speak, give us the right words. If we need to listen, give us the patience to listen. If we need to clarify, give us humility to ask instead of assuming. If we need to apologize, give us courage to say I was wrong. If we need to set a boundary, give us strength to do so without hatred. If we need to step away, give us wisdom to know when. And if we need to forgive, soften our hearts towards forgiveness. Ya Allah, protect us from reacting out of unrighteous anger. When our emotions rise, help us to remember the words of your messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The strong person is the one who controls himself when angry. Give us that strength, not the strength to overpower people, not the strength to win every argument, not the strength to have the last word. Give us the strength to govern ourselves, to control our tongues, our hands, our messages, our assumptions, our reactions, our egos. Ya Allah, when someone hurts us, don't let their actions determine our character. When someone is cruel, don't let us become cruel. When someone is arrogant, don't let us become arrogant. When someone humiliates us, don't let humiliation become a part of our strategy. When someone speaks badly about us, protect our tongues from speaking badly about others. When someone refuses to apologize, don't let us become consumed by the apology we never received. And when someone doesn't change, help us accept that we cannot control another person's heart. Ya Allah, help us distinguish between what belongs to us and what belongs to someone else. Help us carry our own responsibility and help us release what was never ours to carry. For those of us who need to have difficult conversations, give us courage. Let our words be honest without being cruel. Let us speak about behavior without attacking someone's character. Let us communicate our hurt without using our hurt as a weapon. Let us seek repair rather than victory. Let us ask what would make this situation better rather than how do I make them understand that only I am right. Ya Allah, for those of us who need boundaries, give us clarity. Teach us that patience does not require us to accept harm. Teach us that forgiveness does not require unlimited access. Teach us that mercy does not require us to abandon wisdom. Help us protect ourselves without becoming bitter. Help us create distance without hatred. Help us to say no without guilt when saying no is what is right. Help us to never use boundaries as a way of punishing others. Ya Rabbi, for those of us who are struggling to forgive, meet us where we are. Some wounds take time. Some betrayals are not easily forgotten. Some relationships cannot simply return to what they were. So give us a forgiveness that is rooted in you, a forgiveness that does not deny what happened, a forgiveness that does not make us naive, a forgiveness that frees our hearts from the desire for revenge, a forgiveness that allows us to say, Ya Allah, I leave this matter with you. Remind us of your words. Would you not love that Allah should forgive you? Ya Allah, we love your forgiveness, so teach us to forgive and to help us remember that forgiveness is not our responsibility, it is our right, and it is for us more than the one that is being forgiven. Ya Allah, heal our families. Heal marriages, heal friendships, heal relationships between parents and children, heal relationships between siblings, heal communities, heal the places where resentment has taken root, where there has been misunderstanding, bring clarity, where there has been anger, bring calm, where there has been pride, bring humility, where there has been distance, bring healing, where healing is good. And where distance is necessary, let it be a distance without any type of spite and animosity. Ya Allah, for anyone here who has been deeply hurt by another person, you know it. You know the pain. You know the betrayal. You know the rejection. You know the words they still hear in their minds. You know what has been done to their trust. You know what is done to their heart. Ya Allah, heal them and all of us. Don't let someone else's wrongdoing become the defining story of their life. Replace resentment with peace. Replace fear with tawakkul. Replace the need for another person's approval with contentment in your approval. Replace the desire for revenge with trust in your justice, and give them back the parts of themselves they feel that they have lost. Ya Allah, we also ask forgiveness for the times that we have been difficult, for the times we spoke harshly, for the times we refused to listen, for the times our ego mattered more than reconciliation, for the times we demanded apologies but struggled to give them, for the times we assumed intentions, for the times we gossiped, for the times we held on to resentment, for the times we used someone else's wrongdoing to justify our own. Ya Allah, forgive us. And if someone is carrying pain because of something we have done, give us the courage to make it right. Ya Allah, make us people of beautiful character. Make us gentle without being weak, strong without being harsh, firm without being cruel, forgiving without being naive, patient without being passive, compassionate without abandoning wisdom. Give us the character of your messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Let us respond to difficult people in ways that bring us closer to you. Let our anger become an opportunity for self control. Let conflict become an opportunity for wisdom. Let boundaries become an opportunity for healthy relationships. Let forgiveness become an opportunity for freedom. Let difficult relationships become opportunities for spiritual growth. Ya Allah, when the next difficult conversation comes, help us to remember you and to remember this discussion. When someone sends the message that triggers us, help us to pause. When someone says something hurtful, help us to choose our response. When we are tempted to gossip, help us to close our mouths. When we want revenge, help us to remember your justice. When we want to control someone else's behavior, help us to remember that their heart belongs to you. And when we don't know what to do, let our first response to be to turn to you. Ya Allah, we cannot control everyone around us, but we can ask you to help us control ourselves. We cannot make everyone understand us, but we can ask you to help us communicate with wisdom. We cannot make everyone apologize, but we can ask you to help us release what cannot change. We cannot change every difficult person, but you can change us. So change us, Ya Allah. Make us better because of what we have experienced. Make us wiser because of what we have endured. Make us softer without making us weaker. Make us stronger without making us harder. And make us people who, when tested by difficult relationships, become more, not less connected to you. Protect us always from hearts that are not humble, tongues that are not wise, and eyes that have forgotten how to cry. Forgive us for our shortcomings and guide and bless us all. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا يا مولانا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم وصلى الله تعالى على خير خلقه محمد وآله وصحبه أجمعين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. Barakallahu feekum. We'll see everyone next Monday, inshallah. Taha, you want to call the adhan for Maghrib? If anybody's fasting, there's some dates that are up here. Feel free to grab one. Oh, and if people can put their chairs against the wall, we'd appreciate it.
Oh.